And I am pleased again to extend a special thanks to our talented WPS team, both civilians, active duty, and reserve forces, and introduce the team lead. Dr. Saira Yamin is our current Ambassador Swanee Hunt Chair for Women, Peace, and Security. And the issues, topics, into all aspects of the college's curriculum in accomplishing the National Department of Defense objectives in the realm of women, peace, and security. So, Dr. Yamin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
I turn this on. Madam President, Honorable Secretary of the Navy, Ambassador Middendorf, Excellencies, Admirals, Generals, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and dear, dear students, welcome. Welcome to the 11th Annual Women, Peace, and Security Symposium at the Naval War College. We are thrilled. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here. The American philosopher, 19th century American philosopher, Ralph Waldo Emerson, said peace has many victories, but it takes brave men and women to fight them. The concept and practice of gendered inclusive peace and security approaches is not novel, yet the global traction on gender-inclusive approaches to security, the increased participation of women in defense and security roles has never been greater. There's a sea change in the way we think about security. Women, Peace, and Security, or WPS, is a framework that gives us the opportunity to innovate, adapt, and generate enduring solutions to complex security challenges that we face today. So, let's see. Why am I? Okay, all right, very good. I'm going to begin this symposium, this very exciting program, two-day event, by doing an informal polling to gauge our collective knowledge of women, peace, and security, provide some background to those who are not very familiar, and also highlight the symposium themes. So I'm going to first test you. Let's see how tech-savvy you are. Let's see. AV, can you please pull the podium up? I am going to ask you to scan. All right. Let's see, this QR code. Maybe bring it back. Can you bring back the slide? Let's see, where is the QR code? Okay, there it is. That's me, who's not very tech savvy. Okay, so please scan the QR code with your smartphone. Do not register. Skip your name. This is anonymous, completely anonymous, or so you think. And now if you've all managed to scan it, now AV, you may please pull the podium up. And we're going to ask a question. How do I feel today? Okay, let's see. This is just a test. This is not your knowledge of WPS. And we'll see what the people are saying. I see some people are tired. I love the honesty. Some people are excited and happy and apprehensive, motivated, wonderful. The entire gamut of human emotions. I love it. And you passed.
For the record, I don't have my phone, but I feel great.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Look at that. That's amazing. Amazing. But it seems that the vast majority are feeling tired. Okay, that's all right. That's all right. You can blame me. It's Monday morning, early. Okay, now let's go to the next one, the real polling. Thank you so much for your energy and for your engagement. I'm going to move to the next question, which is the real question about women, peace, and security, or WPS. Which of these best describes women, peace, and security? Students? students, you're going to be graded, so be very careful. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, students and everyone, please answer. This is a multiple choice question. Which of these best describes women, peace, and security? Is it a mechanism for gender empowerment, an international policy framework to advance greater peace and security, a social justice campaign? I'm not sure, or other. Let's see. No one's, is it? Okay, why is it? I think for some reason, okay, let me see. Is it taking any? Are you able to answer? It's slow. Okay, I get it. Okay, now I see responses. Okay, let's get at least a couple of hundred. And I want to see, let's see the responses. No, I'm learning this, learning about poll everywhere myself. Okay, all right, okay. So the vast majority know the answer, that it is an international policy framework to advance greater peace and security. Very, very good. Very good. I'm very happy to hear that. But I'd like to tell you a little bit more. And now can I have the slides back? My slides back, please. AV, all right. Because I want to talk a little bit about women, peace, and security. All right. Let me see. I want to move to the, okay. This was my polling question. My clicker is somehow, okay, all right. So women, peace, and security is a United Nations Security Council resolution that was passed in October 2000, so 24 years ago. This was a hallmark resolution, the first time the international community acknowledged and recognized that women must be full and equal participants in peace and security alongside men. The United Nations, all member states were signatories of this resolution, and they recognized that women are also disproportionately impacted by war and violence. For example, consider, recently the UN reported that the number of civilian casualties in armed conflict in 2023 increased by more than 33,000 compared to the previous year, 2022. And of those, 72% were women and children. Consider also that rape is commonly used as a strategic weapon of warfare. Even today, it's an age-old practice. Now, to be clear, all genders are targeted during warfare when rape is used as a strategic weapon, but women are disproportionately targeted to punish, terrorize, and humiliate the enemy, and also as a function of genocide and ethnic cleansing. Consider, in 1994, the genocide in Rwanda. Between 100 to 250,000 Tutsi women were raped. And in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the early 1990s, anywhere between 20 to 30,000 women were raped by Serbian soldiers. The United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 identifies 4 key pillars: women's increased participation, the protection of vulnerable women, the integration of the gender perspective to prevent conflict and atrocities such as the ones I mentioned, and providing women access to relief and recovery because they represent half the population of most nations. Next slide, please. The UN regards women as force multipliers. It also considers women, boots on the ground, as imperative for operational effectiveness. Today, to share some numbers with you, we have 8.5% women in military roles in UN peacekeeping missions, compared to 1993, 30 years ago, where there were only 1%. The UN wants to double this number by 2028. Peacekeeping operations can be very complex, as you may be well aware. Women add credibility to these operations. When peacekeeping missions are working with local communities, they feel much safer when there are women there. Gender-based violence is more likely to be reported when there are female peacekeepers. Disarmament missions, which requires going into the homes of local communities, are much more efficient because the likelihood of conflict with communities is reduced when there are mixed-gender teams. Importantly, the visibility of women peacekeepers also changes the narratives about women's roles in society, changing the norms, helping reconstruct norms, social norms about what women can and cannot do. Now, peace negotiations is an area where women are still vastly underrepresented. And these two women over here, the picture you see, formidable negotiators. To your left, Roberta Jacobson, US Assistant Secretary of State for the Western Hemisphere. And to your right, Ms. Vidal Ferrero of Cuba, the Director of Northern Affairs. These women negotiated on behalf of their governments as trusted emissaries of their governments to help unfreeze relations between the two countries which were estranged. They were the secret weapons of their respective administrations that helped bring about an amazing rapprochement in their relationship. The countries had broken ties in 1961, and as a result of this negotiation, President Obama became the first American president to visit Cuba since 1928. And as a result of these negotiations, the US eased trade ties, removed restrictions, travel restrictions, and they started talking again. Of course, it's true that relations deteriorated again in successive administrations. But what do women do that helps them do so well in negotiations? Women are more inclined to use cognitive empathy in tough negotiations, which means the ability to understand and perceive the thoughts and feelings of the other, and it helps break the ice. And so here I have a picture from the Philippines peace process. There was an insurgency underway in the southern province of Mindanao. More than 40 years had passed. Bloodshed, violence, displacement, nothing doing. Negotiations between the government and insurgent groups had been underway for 15 years and no outcomes. The woman you see here to the right, a university professor named Miriam Coronel Ferrer, lobbied to get engaged in the negotiation process and become the chief negotiator for the Philippines government. And President Aquino asked her, he said, "How are you going to negotiate with the insurgent group?" The largest insurgent group, by the way, is the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. And President Aquino said to her, "How are you going to negotiate with an insurgent group that is Muslim and you're a woman? How are you going to do that?" And she said, "Sir, because I'm a woman, I'm more likely to be trusted by the other side. Women appear less intimidating for right or wrong reasons. They have this soft power. And believe me, this woman, university professor, became the first woman ever to sign a major peace agreement with a rebel group. And this peace agreement was signed in 2014. Amazing, transformative. Next slide, please. And the same happened in in Colombia. Peace negotiations with the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, one of the most potent terrorist groups in modern history. There had been a war, guerrilla warfare, terrorism in Colombia since 1962. The Colombians had been fighting a war with these terrorist groups, drug gangs, criminals, for about half a century, and they were tired. And they had also started a negotiation process with them, but nothing was happening. It was almost as if the Colombians took the cue from the Philippines, because I personally know they were going a lot to the Philippines to learn how the Philippines was managing the negotiation process. And then they introduced the gender element. They started bringing in women, and they had 4 rounds of negotiations with FARC ex-combatants in Havana, Cuba, and they started flying women from civil societies, a very strong peace constituency, to negotiate with the FARC. 43% of them were women. And they found that women were more willing to forgive and reconcile with the FARC. Of course, working with insurgent groups or rebel groups or terrorist groups is never popular. It polarized the Colombian society. But the Colombian government's gender inclusion policy worked, and within a year and a half of women's inclusion, they were able to sign an agreement, and FARC agreed to demobilize and disarm. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's go to my next question. Avi, can you please pull up the podium for me? Okay, now I'm going to move to the next question here. All right, now this question is, will increased participation of women in defense and security roles promote greater peace? Please use your cell phones, again. And interesting, okay, and I'm going to show the responses. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I see let's see what else we can see over here. Okay, other. Other is, I think, does anyone want to speak up and say what you've chosen as far as the other is concerned? You know, I was a bit, wasn't fair with this one because I didn't put an answer that challenged the question itself.
Let me answer it for you. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Yes. And you're absolutely right. And this is the consensus of the international community. Avi, can you please bring my slides back up? And next slide, please. We have, first of all UN member states are signatories of Women, Peace and Security, the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And to date, 109 countries have national action plans, a commitment, policies, frameworks to advance this objective, women's increased and meaningful participation in peace and security roles. And every year, these numbers increase. 109 states, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the US became the 50th country in 2011 to have a national action plan. This was under the Obama administration. But as someone who's American by choice, I'm very, very proud to say that in 2017, the US became the first and only country to have a comprehensive law on women, peace, and security. That's incredible. That is incredible. And every year, the numbers increase. Next slide, please. Okay, so what I want to show you over here, I have a snapshot over here of some data from countries, a diverse mix of women in the military. Unprecedented momentum in women's increasing participation in defense and security sector roles. I have NATO countries here, I have some countries over here which have the largest militaries in the world, some countries that would be perceived as very traditional and conservative, whom you would think would never have women in military roles. Note that many of them have opened up combat roles for women. Many of them. Some of them are even requiring mandatory military service by women. These countries would not be combat ready without the inclusion of women in uniform. I have so many of them, and importantly, as I said, this is just a snapshot. What it's not showing you are the trends. So for example, the UK right now has 12% women. And by the year 2030, they want to increase the percentage of women to 30%. Japan has 9% women, and it wants to increase their percentage to 13% by 2030. Russia has 45,000 active duty women, 1,100 in combat roles in Ukraine. Next slide, please. And Ukraine, by the way, has 22 to 25% women in the military, 5,000 in combat roles, frontline combat roles. Ukraine would not be able to defend itself against Russia. It will not be able to deter Russia without women in the military. Women aged between 18 to 60 years old, and the percentages of women in Ukraine in the military has increased by 60% since 2016. Sorry, 40% since 2016. This is huge. The Russian military, the army, is 3 times the size of the Ukrainian military. In other words, Ukraine has to rely on its women, but you see women on the front lines, but you don't see them in the headlines. What we hear is more about the Ukrainian women is their displacement and human trafficking and exploitation, which is part of the story, but not everything. Women are agents of change. They're brave women fighting on the front lines. Next slide, please. And NATO became a WPS stakeholder in 2007. It has a long experience with mixed gender teams, female engagement teams in the Balkans, in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they found that it was very important to have female engagement teams to work with local communities. And NATO integrates WPS concepts across its 3 core tasks: deterrence and defense, conflict prevention, international cooperation. And its most recent summit in Washington, D.C. in July, they identified new threats to highlight the importance of WPS principles in their policies, including tech-facilitated gender-based violence, climate change, Russia's war against Ukraine, and gender threats. Now that is important. Tech-facilitated gender-based discrimination and directed against women in particular. It's very important in the context of Russia and Ukraine because about 54% of the population in both countries are women. So Russia has been using gendered misinformation to polarize the Ukrainian society in particular, to silence political dissent, and to silence, and basically to divide the opinions, influence and shape perceptions. Next slide, please. So I was talking about the US policy framework. It's very sophisticated. The US, since 2011, since the rollout of the first National Action Plan, signed the US WPS Act. It has a national strategy which identifies 4 agencies as key implementation agencies, including the Department of Defense, State, Aid, and Homeland Security. It is a bipartisan political act, legislative act. We have a bipartisan congressional caucus on WPS, and as late as last October, last year, we had the Biden administration revise the national strategy and national action plan. And importantly, President Trump is the one who signed the Women, Peace, and Security Act in 2017. Next slide, please. So the Department of Defense has 3 key defense objectives. The first one is to model and employ women, peace, and security principles across the joint force. Ensure that women's roles are diversified, that women have, there's a critical mass of women in the organization with decision-making abilities, and they're advanced to leadership positions. Defense Objective 2 is to promote women, peace, and security in partner nations by helping build the capacities of their defense and security sectors. And Defense Objective 3 is the protection of vulnerable women in partner nations and to better understand the gendered impacts of armed conflict and crisis. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that in this symposium here, we've brought so many experts who are joining us from various geographic combatant commands, from the Department of State, international partners who are here to show you how they apply these principles in a military operational environment. 2 gender analysis activities. I don't want you to miss out on them. Please go and sign up for these activities this afternoon because it's a very unique opportunity to acquire some skills, how to actually understand women and men and boys and girls' different experiences in crises and disasters, and how the DoD and US civilian agencies and international partners use this knowledge to help build security for civilian populations. Next slide, please. All right. This, I would say, is Defense Objective 2 in action. This is a picture of female officers from the Office of Defense Representative of Pakistan and Pakistani military officers from all 3 services. According to the US Department of State Political and Military Affairs Office, the number of Pakistani women getting military education in US institutions, this is capacity building of a partner nation, has increased by 150% in the last decade. This is a new way of building relationships with partner nations, expanding the constituencies, the groups, the stakeholders we work with. And these relationships built in peacetime will help avert conflicts and crises. And this is happening all over the world. And there's enormous interest in security cooperation activities such as these. Next slide, please. So I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that even though Russia doesn't have a Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan, the value of women as a constituency for leveraging and advancing international cooperation is not lost on Russia. This is a picture of the 4th Eurasian Women's Forum that is convened every 4 years, or a few years, by Russia. The last one was held in September of 24 in St. Petersburg. It brought together countries from BRICS nations, G20, China, Africa. Next slide. To talk about issues such as trade, food security, economics, technology. So Russia too understands that strategic competition is a nudge towards strategic cooperation. The most powerful countries in this new era of strategic competition will be the ones that have the most connections. And Women, Peace and Security provides this amazing opportunity. Next slide, please. So now let me show you just a glimpse of some of the topics that we are covering in our symposium here. Women, Peace and Security is a broad-based, multidisciplinary lens that helps us understand the gender dimensions, critical gender dimensions of peace and security. You have 6 keynotes over the course of 2 days here and multiple electives. These are some of the themes we are going to be covering. I'm not going to read it out for you. It's there for you on the agenda. And next slide, please. And this symposium brings together 90-plus speakers. 90-plus speakers, ladies and gentlemen, the best of the best, the most prominent leaders from the US and around the world, 9 partner nations who are leading women, peace, and security efforts on behalf of their governments and members of civil society. DoD, Department of State, UN, NATO, universities, NGOs. So this is a very unique opportunity. I'm really, truly very grateful to have everyone here. And to close, last slide, please. I just wanted to show you this slide. This is a historic picture of 4 US military officers, all 4-star women, standing together last year. 2 of them in the middle have retired. This picture is to highlight that WPS is not just about adding more women, it is essentially about women's leadership to effect meaningful change. The most powerful and secure countries in the world will be those that develop, that invest in 100% of the talents and skills that are available to them. And those who leave half the population behind will be behind in every sphere. This is how countries succeed, ladies and gentlemen, selecting the best talent regardless of gender. So with that, thank you for your kind attention, and I'll turn it over to the Honorable Secretary of the Navy. Thank you.